Hello and welcome to Nikon Report Extra, the year in review. This is part 1 where we discuss everything that Nikon released this year, our opinions, our thoughts.
In 2021. I was just going to say we should probably put what year it was.
That's true. What year it was. Konstantin and Becky were always with you, bringing you the freshest and the latest Nikon news throughout the year. So we're going to start from the beginning.
Yeah, so the Ghost of Christmas Past, in true Christmas Carol style, the releases that we saw this year in date order for you, because that's how organized we are, saw at the beginning of the year in January improved deliveries of the Z6II and Z7II, which had originally been announced in November 2021. But like all things that come out in November, we don't tend to see generous stocks of them until the beginning of the new year. So we definitely saw that. Do you think that's a sign of things to come with the Z9, Con?
I would like to think so. I really hope that we're going to start to see Z9 deliveries coming in every week, large numbers, and everyone hopefully will get one soon.
I'm a bit concerned about the fact that we're going to be saying 2022 as a thing that is going to be happening in just a couple of weeks' time. I don't feel ready for 2022.
Shall we delay it? Shall I call the boss,
Yes.
wherever he is? Yeah.
Whichever boss it is, please tell them to postpone 2022 for a little bit for me. So then in February, more Z6II and Z7II news. We had new firmware, which included the 4K 60p update for video and improved AF tracking.
So the reason why I include the firmware release is not really kind of a product release per se, but it's just to show that throughout the year, Nikon actually updated their cameras and released quite a few bits of firmware that significantly improved the camera. So in this firmware, they actually enabled 4K at 60 frames per second, which wasn't available at the time. So analogy with Z9, which 8K at 60 frames will come in the future update in 2022. But also we had quite a good improvements over autofocus tracking, face recognition, and animal recognition as well. So there was quite a significant update for the people who bought the camera already at the time.
And I think, as you said, although it's not a product release, it's a significant enough update each time they do it that it's almost like, in some ways, getting a new camera. It's enough of an improvement.
Absolutely. It's again, it shows that Nikon actually updating their cameras and improving them. That's something that we didn't see with DSLR cameras at the time, except D6, I would say, because D6 is still getting updated. But overall, cameras like D850, D750, D780 didn't see update for quite some time. With that system, they tend to upgrade them quite often. And it just tells us that it's not just the hardware you buy, but it's also how they develop the software. The focusing algorithms are being improved all the time. And obviously, once we come back later to a Z6 and Z7 Mark 1 update that will happen later this year, so sometime in November, that significantly improved autofocus speed of those cameras and brought them almost up to speed with Generation 2 cameras. So it just shows us how much Nikon was involved in software development as much as hardware development. Speaking of software development, in March, Nikon announced NX Studio software, which effectively replaced Capture NXD software as a raw developer. Again, new interface, new software, brought the software a little bit more up to speed with the current lineup of Nikon cameras.
Absolutely. And then in March, we had the Z9 development announcement, which just goes to show how long we've been waiting for this camera, but also how much anticipation Nikon created around the Z9. It's definitely been an exciting year of waiting. And then I think that the product itself has really paid off.
I remember there were dark months where people were, I wouldn't say in a bad mood, but they were all preaching doom and gloom and saying when Nikon is going to release something that we're interested in. And then the bombshell of Z9 has happened. And then I would say from that announcement, we started to have a very positive year from Nikon.
Yeah, for sure. Next up in June, so we had a couple of months of nothing after the Z9 announcement. And then in June, we had the announcement of the 50mm f2.8 MC and the 105 f2.8 SMC. So those are the macro lenses that a lot of Z users had been waiting for.
Yeah, that's definitely been a very long-awaited release. I think we talked about them to death, and obviously there was such a huge discussion of which one to get, either 50 or 105. We had lots of comparison between F-mount 105 lenses, let's say, and Z-mount, and one of the Richie comparisons showed it very clearly that Z glass is just out of this world. But also, a lot of people really enjoyed how how compact the 50mm was. And one of those people were you, Becky.
Yeah, I was pleasantly surprised by the 50, and I continue to be pleasantly surprised by it. It produces fantastic images. I didn't expect it to kind of blow me away as much as I thought it would. And I was very positive about it in our video when we went out to the Horniman Museum and the butterfly house.
Yes.
Yeah, that was your first kind of experience of shooting butterflies in a somewhat serious setting, I think.
That's true. I don't really do butterflies in my day-to-day life, no.
No, and then you realize that it's not all fun and games.
Exactly. And then it just opened the door to other things like wildlife, the things I would never do.
That's right. Yeah, we managed to that was one of the biggest developments of 2021 was getting Con to shoot wildlife and insects and doing some macro.
Brought me out of the darkness of the studio environment.
The macro lenses were definitely exciting. I mean, to be honest, if you think about the fact that those announcements came out in June and even now we don't have free stock of the 105 macro, it's still a waiting list situation. It kind of just proves the point on, you know, the supply situation as it is. There obviously are some lenses that came out or were announced later that are now more generally available, but the 105 was a particularly tricky one. The 50 is generally available.
Yeah, a really good release. I would say a lot of people waited for one. I think it was one of the complaints where people say, where are the macro lenses? You know, so we now have, let's say, 2.8, the holy trinity of the Z lenses, where the very kind of dedicated lenses to macro photography. I mean, a lot of people were talking about long lenses and we would see them later on. But those issues that people talked about in the Nikon lineup were addressed. And yeah, as you say, both releases, if you look at the reviews, they were quite successful. You're right, it's a good problem to have a still waiting list for 105 lens. That's just how good it is. It's not just a drought in the supply. Of course, there are supply issues, but also the lens is in very high demand. And the good news is that the shipments are coming in. And while you can't potentially come in and buy one in a shop on a day, but if you place your order, even let's say a couple of months ago, you would get your lens by now, which is really, really good.
At the same time as the announcement of the actual arrivals of the 50 and the 105, we also had development announcements for the not pancake lenses, the ones that you fondly called muffin lenses the other day, which I thought was quite appropriate. The 28mm f2.8 and the 40mm f2. So we found out that those were on their way.
Yeah, and these lenses are so good. I mean, the announcement was overshadowed by the macros, but those lenses to me are the fun lenses. They're very inexpensive. They were about £250 each or 300 depending on the lens. But very small, fairly compact, very good lens to take away with you on a walk. And then for people who like wide angle, they would go with 28, and people who like a little bit more compressed, but not too long lens, then 40mm would do the job. And it was the 40mm for Nikon as well, because we used to have 35s and 50s. Hello. Yes, and what Tilly wants to say is that 40 Pancake is her favorite one. That's it. Just because of its size, it's really good to chew. It's just the right size for her mouth.
It's a good choice, Tilly. Well done.
Exactly. Thank you very much for your feedback. I appreciate it.
Thank you for your contribution to this channel.
Welcome to my channel. Woof woof.
Woof. Okay, then we also, slightly overshadowed by all the lens announcements, had the announcement of NX Field, which is a very useful tool for professional photographers and was perhaps slightly misunderstood at the time, but I think was a great addition and another fantastic thing. June was a good time for announcements.
Absolutely. With the Olympics coming up, it was a very niche bit of software that would allow professional photographers to trigger the cameras remotely, and then you can trigger up to 40 cameras as well. It was developed in collaboration with the France Press news agency as well, so professional photographers was involved, and that again shows us that actually Nikon didn't just answer the questions that us hobbyists had, but actually professional photographers for very niche use. And in this case, Olympics were coming up, and I could see a lot of use of that would be at Olympics or other sports events. Imagine having your cameras behind the goal when then the football is scoring the goal, then suddenly you can trigger your cameras and then post it straight away to the internet, to the newspapers, etc., etc. So again, not something that would be exciting for the YouTubers or something like this, but actually for professionals, it makes sense. And also for prestige of the company, I think it makes sense as well.
Absolutely. At the end of June, we had the official announcement of the ZFC, which was a surprise camera, I think, for a number of people, but very, very welcomed into the Z lineup.
What you're saying is Nikon didn't forget about the YouTubers.
No, the influencers.
just like us.
Yeah, exactly. And at the same time, they announced the development of the 18-140 DX. Now, that kind of showed us that Nikon were very much supporting DX users, that they wanted to bring new people into the Z Fold, not just Nikon users who were using DSLRs, but also people who were perhaps using smartphones or other devices to create their content with. And they wanted to bring this whole kind of new generation of photographers into the Z family, let's say.
I think ZFC was an interesting camera from several points, because obviously it's a first retro mirrorless cameras that Nikon made, and obviously a lot of people made analogies to original Nikon DF, which was for a lot of people very polarizing cameras, or what we call it the Marmite of Nikon. It is the camera that brought a lot of people the good feelings about the equipment. Sometimes we don't just think about taking pictures, but we also enjoy using the equipment. And a lot of modern cameras forget to do that because they become the tools, they become extension of your hand. But for a lot of us, Nikon film cameras were one of the first cameras we used, and it brought a lot of memories of just enjoyment of taking the camera and taking a shot and pressing the shutter release button, etc., etc. So Nikon ZFC brought a lot of those feelings back, and that's why I think this camera was so popular, not just with young people in the generation of YouTube or Minecraft or you name it, but also by photographers who started with their film cameras originally and used Nikon equipment since then.
I think that another thing that Nikon did was really played to the film popularity, because obviously film is hugely popular now again, and it has had a resurgence over the last few years. Unfortunately, with some of the price increases on film, it's going to be unworkable for people to revert back to film, but this is a nice compromise.
Oh yeah, and Kodak is increasing their prices again in January.
By 25 to 30%,
Oh, yeah.
which is painful.
Buy your film now.
As a Kodak user, that's very, very painful. But I will say, and I've seen a lot of photographers in recent days, I would say, even going, I'm actually going to stick with digital for the most part for my photography, because now it's becoming just too expensive to shoot film as much as they love the film experience. So the ZFC kind of gave a few, I would say at least a few people, that ability to feel like they're shooting with a film camera, giving them that experience without actually having the expense of it. And I really do hope that Nikon bring out a ZF. If the ZFC has been as popular as we've seen it worldwide, then maybe they'll put some beans into developing a ZF, which would be great.
Then in September, we saw a release of 40mm f2. So its development announcement was 3 months ago, but they released it finally in September, and a lot of people got their hands on it. We tested it, and we hopefully will release our review very soon. And also in October, we saw the release of 18-140 lens. And again, not many people were hyped about this lens, but then from the reviews that we saw, a lot of people said that is actually a lot better than the F-mount version of 18-140, and it's a lot better than the 18-200 or 18-300 DSLR equivalent. So the build quality is fantastic. The only concern about this particular lens was the plastic mount. Everything else was much better than the previous generations.
Yeah, for sure. And I think even you, not being a ZDX user yourself, was pleasantly surprised by the quality of the 18-140 when we took it out for a day's shooting with the ZFC. And I think you were pleasantly surprised, were you not, by that one?
I was, yes. The image quality was quite on par. I still prefer 24-200, but that's because I'm a full frame user, and 18-140 just doesn't fit based on that. But it is for people shooting DX and got their ZFC. It's actually a reasonably small package. I thought the 18-140 would be quite front heavy on ZFC. It is actually not. And if you got a small rig grip, it balances quite nicely. So for people shooting Z50 or ZFC, this is a really good all-rounder.
Excellent. Moving on to the biggest announcement of the year by far in October, on the 28th of October, in fact, we had the Z9 official announcement, which had been led up to with 4 teasers. Was it 4 teasers from Nikon?
Yes. I think the first 3 we were excited about, and the 4th one came out literally the day before the announcement. So it's kind of, a lot of people just saw it and I was like, yeah, the camera's going to be announced on tomorrow. We pretty much know everything. But this whole campaign that of 4 teasers, one being released each week and highlighting a certain particular feature of the camera, definitely brought a lot of enthusiasm from photography circles. And also a lot of people, even us, published videos just trying to dissect each individual teasers, those 30 seconds of video, just dissecting it second by second and thinking, what does it mean and what kind of feature is this, etc., etc. So if you haven't seen it, if you want to relive that, then definitely over Christmas have a look at those videos.
Absolutely. It's almost funny to watch them in hindsight, having now seen all the specs and seeing what people were predicting, down to, the location of a particular button or how a photographer was holding something. It was definitely the most exciting build up to a camera that I think I've ever experienced in the last sort of 13, 14 years of working with.
Remember, we spent 5 minutes discussing what this empty space on top of the camera where Z9 says before shot release, but is it a touch screen? Is it a touch button or something? Is it a sensor button?
It's an empty space.
It's an empty space apparently, but we spent 5 minutes discussing it. But yeah, you're right. I think they only did a teaser campaign for Nikon DF. Remember Chubb in the mountains somewhere in Scotland, sitting next to the fire and just, looking into the sunset or something like this, So that was something like this, but aimed at professional photographers. Remember the first one was the fashion photography.
Yes.
This guy photographing a model in this, was it some Japanese museum somewhere?
Yeah.
And the first thing we saw was, it's a big camera and it's really nice. It's got 3 function buttons. The screen rotates with you, etc., etc. And obviously the focusing speed.
A lot of information in some of those teasers. They were like really packing in all the clues. And then also the white dots of makeup on her eyes. And people going, is that to help with the eye autofocus? No, it's just fashion.
Let me put my little,
tin hat
on there. Absolutely. But then also remember the naysayers were saying, he's shooting fashion, so the camera focusing speed is probably very bad. They don't show, sports or wildlife. And then next week, bam, and here we go. We're in the countryside with Gal Gadot and, photographing birds at 8K, 60 frames per second.
Yeah, exactly. It was so many little clues in there. It was truly a momentous occasion when we finally saw what those specs were. Of course, along with the Z9, which we've talked about so much on this channel and probably could talk about more and will for sure when we start to see them in the new year. But along with that, we had the long-awaited 100 to 400 S lens, which was the first of the kind of super telephotos in the Z range that we are still very much looking forward to.
The reason why 100 to 400 exists is because obviously it is a lens that a lot of sports and wildlife guys need. And the whole thing about Nikon not having long lenses was quite important for Nikon because, literally the 7200 is the longest focal distance lens we had. So announcing this lens to cover the longer range and obviously announcing the 400mm development as well, which happened at the same time, again, answer the questions that people had for the long telephoto lenses. So we didn't just have them now on the roadmap. We also had the announcement of those lenses that they will be released very soon.
Exactly. Along with that, because it was a big release date for Nikon, that 28th of October day was all the releases. We had a surprise lens, which was the 24 to 120 f4, which was a little bit unexpected. Obviously, it's been a very popular lens in the F mount range, so it makes sense that they would have one in the Z mount. From the little bit that we have seen of it, it does look very, very impressive. Obviously, if you don't quite have the budget to stretch to the 2K 24 to 70 f2.8, but you want a step up from the 24 to 70 f4, this looked like it was going to be the happy medium, but more on that later.
Absolutely. And then on the roadmap, we had 24 to 105 lens, which I think became 24 to 120. But now with 28 to 75 being announced, I think Nikon is going to release 24 to 105, 24 to 85, 24 to 165, you name it. It's just what Nikon does.
All the mid-ranges.
All the mid-ranges.
If you haven't seen our Nikon report yet, we do talk more about the 28 to 75 on both last week and this week's Nikon report, so do go check those out.
And we love it very much.
Yes. With the 28th of October, we also got, as you mentioned, the 400mm f2.8 TC VRS development announcement. So this is a 400mm lens with a built-in teleconverter, which we have yet to hear any more on, but we know it's in development. We also got the announcement of NX Tether and NX Mobile Air, which again is more software for, I would say, not just professional photographers, but for photographers who want to transfer their images on the job or on the fly.
Absolutely. So now Nikon is slowly replacing their bits of software and trying to streamline. So we have Capture Control Pro 2, which is also does tethering, but also does a lot more than that. And it's a paid software, but we now have NX Tether, which is a free bit of software, which you can use if you need to tether your cameras to the computer. Now we also have NX Mobile Air, and NX Mobile Air is not a SnapBridge replacement. It actually allows you to transfer your images not only via air to your mobile device and upload it to FTP. That's what, again, SnapBridge doesn't do, but also use a USB cable to transfer your images from the camera to your mobile phone. So again, it's something that professional photographers might use a lot more than the casual user for whom SnapBridge is good enough.
Exactly.
Okay, so then on the 9th of November, we had another firmware releases, and those were for first generation Z6 and Z7 cameras. We significantly improved autofocus speed and brought them up almost up to speed to generation 2 Z6 and Z7. We did a comparison, so do have a look how it was prior to the firmware and after the firmware. And I think we will do some tests with Z6 and Z6II firmwares as well, just to see how they compare. There is a rumored firmware, which is hopefully will come out very, very soon. Who knows? Maybe there's still time till New Year's. They may release this year. That should also improve autofocus speed of Z6II and Z7II cameras. Stay tuned, and hopefully something will be announced very shortly.
Perfect. On the 11th of November, Nikon actually announced a very interesting collaboration with Nissin and Profoto, which was a surprise, but maybe a sign of things to come.
Yes, the reason why I think it's interesting is in light of 28-75 release and Tamron involvement, it's interesting for me to see because, as I said previously, I wonder what's going to happen. Maybe some flash guns are going to be produced by Nissin and marketed as a Nikon flash gun. You never know. Or maybe Profoto is going to release a Nikon flash as well. You never know, but that would be probably could cost a lot more than current Nikon flash guns are. Obviously, the base of this, obviously, they talk to each other. They will make sure that the TTL protocols will work well with the Nissin and Profoto products. But because we're starting to see Tamron involvement into things, it just opens more questions than it answers. So I'm just going to leave it at that. Let's see where it's going to take us. But it is an interesting development. I wouldn't just brush it off as just a simple, here's our protocol, you're going to work well with each other.
Yes, more on that when we do our predictions, I think.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then we had the release of 28mm in modern casing. That happened on the 18th of November. So that one is currently available. So the modern casing one costs £249, and you can also buy a retro version for $299. Now, if the retro version is worth this £50 extra or $50 extra in the United States, it's up to you. But both lenses are very good. Optically, they are identical.
Exactly. We've tested the special edition version for what difference it makes for all of our reviews so far. The non-special edition should be shipping hopefully towards the end of the year, and we'll start to see that in the new year.
Fantastic.
Here comes December. So in December, we had the development announcement of the 800mm f6.3 VR, which we do know is a phase Fresnel lens, so PF lens, and is also an S-line lens. So this is the first of Nikon's super telephoto primes that I think we'll see. It is the longest focal length on the roadmap, and we're very, very excited to see what Nikon does with that. There's been a release of an image, but they have said that might change closer to the time. So very little is known right now, but I do expect that to be a surprisingly popular lens.
Absolutely. And then it's good news. We have now 400 lens being developed, 800mm lens being developed, which kind of covers very long end and the 400 bit, and then who knows, maybe next year we will see 600mm announcement or 200 to 600mm announcement, etc., etc. So it's good to have long lenses for pros who will need such lenses. So again, more things to come. At the moment, all we have is literally just the announcement that they are making it. And then on the same day, we had Nikon Z28 to 75mm 2.8 lens. We're not going to discuss it now. You hold me. But we had a good discussion over 2 podcasts already, so have a look what we think about it. It's an interesting lens. I'm looking forward to get my hands on it because I want to test it. I want to see how good it is. I don't want to judge it by just the announcement and so. I want to see if it's worth £950 recommended resale price.
Excellent.
All right, and this is the end of the part 1 of our Year in Review podcast. Do join us later on for the part 2, where we're going to discuss Nautilus, predictions, and what to expect from Nikon in 2022.
Thank you very much for watching. Please do give us a like and a subscribe if you're on YouTube, and a follow, perhaps even a review on the podcast platforms. It would be greatly appreciated.
Fantastic. We will see you next week. Bye-bye.